This day in sports history. This episode is brought to you by the Sterling Soap Company. How often do you think about your soap? Well, if you answered, not much, maybe you should. You see, a lot of what passes for soap in stores is technically not soap, according to the FDA's definition. It's full of lab-created chemicals and detergents because it's cheaper to make. Now, what if you could buy natural soap made from natural ingredients like tallow, palm oil, coconut oil, and scented with essential oils, and for just a little bit more than you'd pay for grocery store soap? Sterling Soap is 100% natural, and with a wide variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, and cologne, there's a product and a scent for just about everybody. Check them out for yourself at sterlingsoap.com. That's STIRLING soap.com. It's February 23rd, and on this day in 1958, Formula One driver Juan Manuel Fangio was kidnapped in Cuba by Fidel Castro. This was before the revolution that would bring Castro to power. At this point, Fulgencio Batista was the man in power in Havana, and Castro's guerrilla forces were plotting in the mountains. Batista wanted Havana to be a southern Las Vegas, and Fangio was in the country for the second running of the Cuban Grand Prix, a race that he had won the previous year. Fangio was a four-time Formula One champ, and he posted the fastest time in qualifying and was set to start on the pole for the race. But the night before, Fangio was in the lobby of his hotel when a man with a gun stopped him and identified himself as a member of the 26th of July Revolutionary Movement. He then escorted Fangio out of the hotel to a waiting car. The kidnapping had been pulled off to create news of Castro's cause and make Batista look bad. Batista wasn't budging, though. He declared that the race would go on as planned the next day, and it did. And after Fangio was released, he reported that he had been treated well during his brief imprisonment, with Castro even apologizing to him. The race was marred by a horrible accident, though, on lap 6. Here's newsreel coverage of the event.
Fangio is released, but he can't ride in the event he was favored to win. Instead, tragedy stalks Havana's beautiful Malecon circuit. The start had been delayed with the hope Fangio would show up. Now, 27 drivers representing 12 nations have completed a half hour of driving. Suddenly, disaster! Skidding into the crowd at 100 miles an hour, one of the cars mows down dozens of spectators. The driver, Armando Garcia Cifuentes, is dragged from the wreckage with serious injuries. 6 deaths and 32 others injured are counted in the crash, which cancels the race and all its sporting luster.
There were actually a total of 7 killed, along with the 30 others who suffered injuries. The race was red flagged at that point and never restarted. The 1959 edition of the Cuban Grand Prix was canceled as Castro had begun his revolution. The race returned in 1960 to race a different circuit, but that was the final year that the race was ever contested in Cuba. On this day in 1985, Indiana basketball coach Bobby Knight had his most infamous meltdown. Indiana was playing at home in Assembly Hall against rival Purdue on this day. The Hoosiers were not having the kind of year that most people had come to expect, and at this point, they were 14-9 overall and just 6-7 in the Big Ten. They had lost 2 straight conference games. The most recent one was a 16-point drubbing at the hands of Illinois. And things were not going well in the opening minutes of this game with the Boilermakers. Purdue was up 11-6 just 5 minutes into the game when Coach Knight got into an argument with official Fred Jaspers after the Hoosiers were called for their 3rd foul in 59 seconds. Knight took a seat, but he kept on talking, and he must have said the wrong word, as he seemed to be able to do quite often, because Jaspers teed him up. That brought Knight back to his feet with more words directed at Jaspers. As Purdue's Steve Reed stepped to the free throw line in front of the Indiana bench, Knight turned around and he grabbed his chair and flung it across the court.
Steve Reed, an excellent free throw shooter, will have the honors shooting the technicals. Looky here, looky here. Bobby Knight just threw his chair clear across the free throw lane.
Now, a couple of things here. The chair was one of those plastic things that you probably sat in when you were in, grade school. There wasn't a lot of weight to it. Second, Knight wasn't really aiming it at Reed. It flew in front of him by about 10 feet. Neither of those points is meant to really excuse the act, but merely to paint a more accurate picture that if you haven't seen the video in a while, he really was not throwing it at the kid. Reed was obviously surprised to see a chair go whizzing by in front of him, but Indiana players were not. In an interview with Dan Patrick many years later, Dan Dockich, who played for Coach Knight and was there that day, said that they had seen Knight throw lots of chairs daily during practice. So now a second technical foul was called, and Knight was ejected, but he refused to leave the court, continuing to yell at Jaspers and the other two officials, Ed Bova and London Bradley. Jaspers, fearing what may happen next, called for Indiana's athletics director Ralph Floyd to come over. While Jaspers and Floyd talked over Knight's behavior, he continued to scream at the other officials. At that point, Jaspers walked back towards the scorer's table, indicating that Knight was being ejected and a third technical foul was called. Now, here's the thing. A few years after the chair throwing incident, Coach Knight was a guest on the David Letterman show, and this was his explanation for why he hurled that chair.
Well, really what happened was it was the first game that I'd coached in Indiana without a jacket.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah, and threw you off a little.
Well, I reached for the jacket, and I would have sailed the jacket. And our team doctor, Brad Bomba, was a great football player in Indiana. He was an All-American, and he told me later, he said, as soon as I saw you turn around and reach for your jacket, you didn't have it on, I tried to grab everything you could throw. He said, I grabbed the trainer, he said, the only thing I missed was the chair. He said, you beat me to the chair.
So if it had been cooler in Indiana that day and he had kept his normal routine of wearing a jacket to the game, he says he would have thrown that instead of the chair. One more case of the weather having an effect on world events. Coach Knight eventually left the floor, but not before he issued a few more words to Jaspers, Bova, and Bradley on his way to the locker room. Indiana lost the game 72-63 for their third straight loss. Hey, I needed to call a quick timeout to let you know that we're giving away a $50 gift card to Homefield Apparel. Have a favorite college sports team? Of course you do. You're listening to a sports podcast. Well, Homefield Apparel has all the great gear so you can support your team in style. Jerseys, hoodies, hats, and a whole lot more are available in your team's colors and insignias. So go to sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways for your chance at a $50 gift card to Homefield Apparel. I've also put a link in the show notes. Now, let's get back out there. We've got more of this episode to do. On this day in 2021, Tiger Woods nearly died in a one-car crash near Los Angeles. Woods was driving a loaner vehicle, a Genesis GV80 SUV, from the golf tournament that he was hosting at Riviera Golf Club, and he was on his way out to Rolling Hills Country Club to continue shooting a documentary that he had begun the day before. It was part of an endorsement deal with Golf Digest and the Discovery Channel. Well, the day before, he had given golf lessons to David Spade, Jada Pinkett, and Dwayne Wade. On this day, Drew Brees and Justin Herbert were waiting for a little golf tutorial. But Woods never showed up. Instead, at around 7 a.m., and in a hurry to get there, Woods was doing an estimated 82 miles per hour on a windy stretch of road where the speed limit was 45. He was unable to negotiate a curve, never applying a brake to slow the car. He plowed through a median, hit a curb and then a wooden sign, crossed over the opposite lanes of traffic, smashed into a tree, and rolled the vehicle over. He suffered multiple compound fractures in the tibia and fibula of his right leg, with additional injuries to his right foot and ankle. He had a rod inserted in his right leg with screws and pins inserted into his foot and ankle. Now, there was a point where it was 50-50 whether he was actually going to need his right leg amputated. He spent 3 weeks in the hospital before being sent home to Florida, where he spent another 3 months convalescing. Prior to the crash, Woods had gone through his 5th back surgery, and there was a thought that he might have been impaired with pain medication leading to the crash, but No toxicology test was done, and he was not charged due to a lack of witnesses to the crash sequence. He returned to play a 36-hole scramble father-son event with Charlie 10 months later. He made his official return to the tour in April 2022 when he played the Masters and shot a 1-under-71 in the first round, 508 days after his car accident on this day in 2021. And on this day in 1980, Eric Heiden won his fifth and final gold medal at the Lake Placid Olympics, though his morning did not exactly go as planned. He'd watched the U.S. hockey team beat the Soviets the night before, and he slept through his alarm the next morning.
I had set my alarm clock to go off. Usually I'd get up about 3 hours before the competition and go get some breakfast, go through my normal 2-hour pre-race routine, and an hour and a half before the race I hear a knocking on my door because I had slept through my alarm clock, and it was my coach going, we're out in the car waiting for you, where are you? So I had to scramble to get ready for that 10,000 meters the next day just because I was a little bit exhausted from watching the hockey team the night before.
He was able to regroup and get ready for the race just fine, apparently. Not only did he win the gold medal, but he broke the world record by 6.2 seconds in doing it. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. While it may seem that plant-based milks or alternative milks have just recently shown up on grocery store shelves, they have actually been around for more than 5,000 years. Medieval cookbooks reference almond milk. The earliest mention of soy milk is on a Chinese stone slab from around the 1st to 3rd century CE. Coconut milk can trace its origin back to Madagascar and Southeast Asia around 3000 to 1500 BCE. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.